special episode of GenYnot. A lot of you have been wondering and asking us and tweeting us and asking when is our second season is going to start. More information is going to come, but we felt that this conversation could not wait until this season 2 of GenYnot started. We're now have come up on the first year anniversary of the Zimmerman verdict. For those who don't know, Zimmerman was last year was acquitted of the murder of Trayvon Martin, a young man from Florida. And so we wanted to give an opportunity for 2 young men who we feel that we've interacted through GenYnot, who have done some amazing work, to briefly give us their reflection on a 1-year anniversary and also share with us the work that they're doing and why is that work important to the movement. So much has happened over the last 12 months, but much more work still needs to be done to prevent another Trayvon Martin from happening. And so I'm truly excited to be joined with both Pervis Taylor as well as Charles Davis. And so if we can briefly just start, kick right in, and to get your perspective, if you can introduce yourself to our audience, our GenYnot audience, and tell our audience what the work that you're doing, and also why is that work, do you feel that work is important to the overall movement? And Pervis, we can start with you.
Hi everybody, I'm Pervis Taylor III. I'm a life coach, author, inspirational speaker. I facilitate workshops with young men of color, specializing on emotional processing, as well as with youth of color in terms of them developing their narrative and the power of sharing your story with others. I think that my work is important, but mainly because young men, especially men and young men of color, are not taught to be able to express their emotions. Is viewed as weak or feminine, and the reality is that we all have emotions and we all have things that need to be worked through and sorted through. And I provide that safe environment for people to share their hearts, to share their hurts, to share their pain, stuff that they don't get the opportunity to share on a regular basis because they have to walk around under the facade of machismo, masculinity. I have to be hard, I have to be tough. And I specialize in, helping them find that vulnerable space, which is what is needed to be healed. And in terms of just sharing your story, I think once we know each other's story, it breaks down barriers, it breaks down walls, it helps us get to that human level of understanding. So in general, that's what I do with youth.
Thank you. Charles?
Good afternoon, evening, everyone. My name is Charles H.F. Davis III. I serve as the executive director of the Activist Millennials Project, which essentially is the nexus of research and practice related to young people engaged in social justice organizing and activism. And so a lot of the work that we do is providing academic and educational resources to young people, to organizations, to improve their activist practice. We recently completed a field study with a number of Black and brown youth in the state of Florida to understand exactly how it is that they've gone about organizing, but finding some different points and trying to really interrogate how they can improve that practice, whether it's through just understanding more about organizing, about activism on campus, about activism in communities, and various issues that are going on that young people organize around the country. I think that's critically important, largely because there is, in my opinion, being somewhat biased as an educator, there's an educational foundation upon which a lot of the work that we continue to do stands, but much of it is very well outdated, and so many things have changed with the advent of technology, even vis-a-vis this conversation we're having today. But really wanting to understand that, give that information to students, and really kind of push the bar into the 22nd century of social justice organizing.
Thank you, you two, for joining us. And I think it's worth mentioning that the 2 of you didn't start this work yesterday. You didn't start this work immediately after the Trayvon Martin incident. You've been doing this work for years. But I'm really curious, and I think a lot of people are at home, where were you when you heard the Zimmerman verdict? What was your first reaction when you heard it?
For me, I cried because I went to school in Florida, and I've unfortunately I've been susceptible to racism in Florida, and so I just was like, it's 2013, this is still happening. Like, I think I was in disbelief, and I cried because I just couldn't believe that with all the evidence, with everything that was presented, it still came back not guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Charles?
Yeah, so I was in a loft in Dallas with my colleague Lincoln Stevens, and we were both there. We knew it was coming out, and we were both just very, very shocked. Like Pervis, I also went to school in Florida, so I'm familiar with racism in Florida, having been in those similar situations, and even the other cases of Black boys being murdered unjustly and people getting off. And so I was really just heartbroken. And, we kind of just were at a loss for words. I wasn't so much surprised, right, because this continued to happen, whether we're going back to Amadou Diallo or a number of other people. But I was just heartbroken because it seemed so overwhelming. But I also then had a number of questions that emerged from that about the justice system, the ways in which it works, it doesn't work, the things that are broken, the way the state of Florida as an overall system really undermined the integrity of the investigation and the trial itself. But yeah, it hurt a lot. And fortunately I was there with another African-American man who's from Texas who also deals with these very same things, having grown up there. And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to call. And a lot of things were just flushing through my head, having a younger brother, having a nephew, working with black boys as Pervis does. There were just so many different emotions happening. And it took me, I would say, almost until this point, even to process that whole situation and the numbers of experiences that have happened even since then with the Jordan Davis trial and everything else. So yeah, it was just very hurtful. But I was in Dallas, and I'm actually, ironically enough, in Dallas again this summer as well, in that same building that I was in a year ago. So it's really come full circle. And we'll talk about a project that I just finished later. That was very cathartic in bringing that whole process to fruition.
Yeah. And I was just talking to someone earlier about where was I 12 months ago, and I was lucky enough to be in a room filled with 100 other black youth, the Black Youth Project 100, and it was ironic that the culminating event of us getting together, meeting each other for the first time, it was during the Zimmerman verdict, and I just remember many people in the room, the kind of levels of shock that everyone went through, and this unbelieving aspect that, you're right, Pervis, like in 2013 that this could still be happening considering the level of evidence. But also back to what you said, Charles, that this isn't the first time that has happened, and we continue to still lose many Trayvons across the country. And so I'm curious, with both of you, considering the work that you're doing, what is one thing that you've seen happen over the last 12 months that's really helping to move the needle forward to prevent another Trayvon Martin from happening? That's the work that you're doing personally, or something that you've seen in your city?
I will say,
and either of you can start.
I would say for me, I've recently been working with Red Hook Initiative, which is a program here in Brooklyn. It's an inner city project that I've been working with, and as I said, I've been having the students develop their narratives. And I would say that the biggest progress that I've seen is young men being able to express their hurts, to express their emotions, to express, the pain that they've endured and the things that they've gone through. And I always ask a question to whichever group of people that I speak to. I say that we all, as human beings, have an emotion that we're comfortable living in. And for a lot of them, a lot of men in general, it's anger and indifference. And one young man shared with me that he's lived in shock for the past 5 years of his life because he's been falsely identified by the police several times and been abused by them, and no one has come to his aid, no one's come to help him, he hasn't had an outlet to express the pain that he's been through. So he for the first time, he said he feels like his voice is heard. In a matter of 2 weeks that I've worked with him, he said that he feels like he matters and that his voice is important. And so I feel like just through my work, that I've kind of put him on a trajectory towards positivity, because now he doesn't feel the anger that he had. That he doesn't feel marginalized the way he did before. Now he feels like that he matters and that he's important. So I would say for me, on a personal level, I see the evidence of the young men that I've been working with. I see them processing their emotions. I see them becoming more in tune with who they are, and there's power in that. So I see them walking in their power. That's the one thing that I've seen on my end. And just shortly, I've seen a lot of schools, particularly charter schools, they have advocacy counselors now, where they have these counselors work with youth specifically. Like they've added with young black men, they have them specifically work with the young men of color and mentor them and life coach them. And
so the points that Pervis made, that work and that the intentionality behind that work, right? Like being very purposeful and wanting to talk and speak with black men is one of the critical things that has happened over the last year. And so much of what he spoke about really talks about the narrative of Trayvon and sort of the circumstances under which that can even happen, right? Or sort of the black male xenophobia based on this posturing of like hypermasculinity and manhood. And so I think that work is critically important. Some of the work that I've seen, that all of us have seen really at a national scale, is what's going on with the Dream Defenders in Florida. You know, immediately following the verdict coming out, you know, Dream Defenders from all over the state of Florida and even from surrounding states came and occupied the Florida Capitol. And with that, it wasn't just a bunch of young people who were rabble-rousing and wanting to get in the face of legislatures, but that they were very intentional about affecting policy changes. And so we know that stand your ground, although it was not used in the claim of defense, it has been much the stand your ground rhetoric that justified George Zimmerman killing Trayvon Martin. And so they were very intentional of being in the Capitol, meeting with legislators, developing policy initiatives such as the Trayvon's Law in order to not only get reform for stand your ground, but actually try to get it repealed. And to much of their work, one of the gains we've seen against stand your ground, which hopefully will apply or be given some consideration in the Marissa Alexander case, is something related to, I believe it's, trying to think of the actual change that has recently happened, whether warning shots, I think, are okay or not okay, right? And so, you know, we've seen some actual policy shifting based on people who are on the ground doing this meaningful work. You know, so shouts out to Sierra and Ahmad and Phil and Melanie and all the Dream Defenders who have been doing really great work there. So I think that's critically important. And I think also to Pervis's point that we've seen black men become very expressive in different ways of telling their story, right? And so just shortly after I left Dallas after the verdict, I was with a good friend of mine, and he wanted to do an art piece that really spoke about just the general atrocities against black men related to gun violence for those that have been unarmed. And so he had a very interesting artistic expression, which we were able to capture on film that'll be coming out later today, that you can see, you know, for the duration of the week in reflection. But that his way of telling the story was through art, right? And so we've seen that. We've seen brothers writing about it. We've seen brothers talking about it. We've seen those films come out and just people sharing with America the real, you know, the real experience of ourselves, that race is something we deal with, right? That people living in fear of who it is that we are just by being black men is something that we deal with. And so I think if anything, hopefully that discourse has started to become elevated. People are at least starting to listen to it. And somewhat, you know, the level of the cynic that I am, I don't know that the needle's been pushed far enough, right? Because
I agree.
All the things that we've seen that have happened are in some ways cosmetic, right? The narrative hasn't shifted yet, right? People's biases are still there, and we've seen this because, again, you know, Michael Dunn virtually being, you know, convicted of almost killing other men in the car, but not actually being convicted of the person he killed, right? And so there's still something psychologically in America that says it's okay and it's reasonable to be afraid of black male bodies, and that you can defend yourself just for the sense of being afraid. So I don't know that, you know, there's just still a lot of work that we need to do in order to push that needle even further, so we can get past really the sort of undergirding of what says it's okay to just eliminate black male bodies from our ecosystem.
I agree. And a lot of young men have shared with me that they don't feel human. They don't feel like they matter. They don't feel like their voice is heard or they count. They feel insignificant, so they're like, you know what, let me be who you say I'm going to be. That's their alternative. Let me be who you say I am.
Right.
Yeah. My friend Richard Taylor, who's out in Chicago, who we were hoping to have on this, he tells me all the time that if you continue to tell a young man that he ain't shit, eventually he's going to start to believe it. And so I think it's really important that you mention, Charles, is that, like, how do we dig deeper and stop just continue to look at the surface issues? Because yes, policy is, yes, we can change policy, but if we don't change how people feel against black people, particularly black men and black bodies, we're still going to have these stigmas, and we're going to still have people clenching their purses when they walk down the street next to a black man. And so I think there's a lot of work still need to be done. We have to, as a culture, no longer be afraid to talk about race. And so, again, I want to thank the two of you for joining us. I want to briefly shout out some amazing organizations who are doing their own reflections today, who are also continuing to do work, particularly around the freedom side. And so shout out to BYP, BYP 100. You also have the Dream Defenders out in Florida. You also have the Million Hoodies campaign. So, again, thank you for all the work that you're doing, as well as Pervis and Charles. And again, for the viewers, this was just a brief opportunity for us to briefly reflect on the views. There's still much work to be done. You can get connected with these two individuals. Can you guys tell everyone your Twitter handler?
Yeah, I'm at Pervis Taylor, PervisTaylor.
Thanks.
And you can find me at HF Davis. That's HFDAVIS. Swag.
And so look out for more information about GenYnot in the next few weeks, and I look forward to speaking with many of you soon. Thanks again. Bye.